Michal Ron, welcome to Trade Finance Talks TV.
Very nice to see you, Deepesh.
Thank you, likewise. So here we are at Excred International in London. Can you give us a quick elevator pitch? So who are you, where are you from, and what do you do?
Certainly. So I work for the Italian Export Credit Agency, SACE. I'm the Chief International Business Officer, a bit of a mouthful. Effectively, what it means is I deal with everything that is international, starting from transactions, projects overseas. We have 13 offices abroad. And in addition, anything that is policy making for export in international fora, such as the OECD, the Paris Club, the European Union, and the Bern Union.
Thank you very much. And I think one of the really important strategies that SACE introduced in 2017 was the push strategy within the untied facility. Can you talk a bit more about what that is and what that means for SME exporters?
Certainly. So above all, it's an untied facility, so it's not under the OECD export finance rules, which means that we cannot guarantee, we issue guarantees here on an untied basis, on a best effort basis, and we cannot do that over 80% cover and at market pricing. And what we do effectively, and here goes the name push, we select very carefully. It's almost, surgical in the precision. We select international buyers in strategic countries for Italy, and we try to push towards them our SMEs above all, but generally Italian companies where we believe in the relevant sector they can bring value added and of course increase exports from Italy to that specific buyer, but also to that country. And we select them very, very carefully in a variety of sectors, and all the buyer, the international buyer, needs to do is commit to participating in matchmaking events where we bring them together, especially their procurement decision makers, with Italian SMEs. So it's an opportunity that otherwise our companies would not have.
Thank you, Michal. And has the untied facility become increasingly more important given the current geopolitical and macroeconomic situation? So, post-COVID, Russia-Ukraine war, commodity prices, etc., etc.
It certainly has been, if you want, more and more in vogue, and I guess also the simplicity of the process and the documentation has definitely, if you want, contributed as a factor. But what we've seen is that, starting with the COVID period, there was definitely interruptions to supply chains, and now even more so with the Ukraine crisis, there is a need to somehow, bridge the gap over some raw materials that are needed by, in this case, Italy, could be any other country, simply because if we don't assist with the procurement of raw materials into Italy, we will have a breakdown in terms of the manufacturers that then export onwards. So it's a little bit of a vicious circle that we walked into, and we are using untied finance also for strategic imports. So we're looking at anything from energy, but also plastics, it could be nickel, rare earth, and there we target exactly on the reverse side companies overseas that are suppliers, and we do it through traders, largely traders, and at times also through banks. So we create like this, an increase of imports of those materials that our manufacturers need in order to export. So the rationale is turned around.
That's very laser precision there in terms of looking at the problem and actually focusing on the import market there. Let's talk about ESG. How has SACE been changing to adapt for ESG requirements and climate change disclosures, etc., and also in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals?
Yes, absolutely. It's been very much a critical and a priority item for us for the past 2 years. A lot has been done on both fronts, but I would say above all, we started on the domestic end, and now we're moving to the external, to the international side. Using the framework of the EU Green Guarantee, it's called the New Green Guarantee. We've started working very seriously with Italian companies in issuing such guarantees. We have so far guaranteed a volume close to 6 billion euro. And that is a lot. Basically, what we do is we assist our companies in their transition towards renewable energy and greener fields, if you want. And therefore, it has a major incentive, if you want, to go a step forward towards the ESG. Now, in terms of our climate change policy, again, we're working on that in order to adhere to our country's commitment, both at the COP26 level, but also Export Finance for Future, the E3F, which we are one of the signatories, one out of only 10. Yep. And that is proving, slightly more lengthy as a process, because clearly we have to remember not all ECAs, not all nations have an identical starting point. It also depends on the DNA of your industry, and as an export credit agency, we support our national champions, and wherever they are, they might be also in the oil and gas sector, as is the Italian case. So there isn't an on and off switch in terms of ESG. It is a case of a gradual introduction of basically phasing out the fossil fuel support. At the same time, however, in parallel, very much a case of incentivizing, like the phasing in of companies that invest in renewable energy and in green technology. So it's a parallel theme. At the same time, it's also gradual, and it's not going to happen overnight. At least in our case, it will be phased out and over a certain time frame.
But it's not going to happen overnight, but it should happen at some stage. Has SACE made commitments to end the financing of perhaps dirty fossil fuels, coal, etc., by a certain period?
We have not yet adhered to a net zero, if you want, objective, if that is exactly what we're seeking. We are focusing on incentives. That is really our first priority, because, as I said, we have a certain road to go to in terms of the transformation of our companies. But we have already, if you want, commenced adhering to our own internal climate change policy, which means certain projects can no longer be, if you want, supported by us. In terms of the carbon and the past restrictions, we have already enforced that since 2.5 years, so we're well on that road. But clearly, the Ukraine crisis has not facilitated for us this process, for the very need to, if you want, replace certain sources of gas. So, on one hand, we are clearly preparing ourselves for a very important transition. On the other hand, there are also geopolitical issues that we need to address, and this is at the ministerial level.
Michal, thank you very much for joining us on Trade Finance Talks TV. A very interesting conversation there about financing that transition, decentivizing and incentivizing certain countries and companies, and also discussing the push strategy of SACE. Thank you.
Great, thanks Deepesh. Great opportunity, and very, very much appreciated to be on this talk.